Good morning, Horticulture 164. We are going to look at the IPM Plan and Description and Rubric that I emailed out to you guys, and I will also attach it to this video on Blackboard for you, so you'll have it in a couple different places. So if you haven't printed it, go ahead and print it. Sorry, used too many vowels there or whatever. But go ahead and print it. Grab an ink pen and just take some notes on it. I feel like with the questions I'm getting in email, you guys are probably thinking this project's a little harder than it is, and it's really not, because most of the information is in your O&T book. And if you go by the rubric and the plan description here, it's going to be a fairly fun project, and not as difficult as you think. So, but we'll start off with the objectives. Students will develop an IPM program for either a turf grass, greenhouse crop, or agricultural crop. And the examples that I've given you, if you're a turf grass person, you could choose tall fescue, or you could choose Bermuda grass, or you could choose zoysia grass, but you're choosing just one. And if you choose turf grass, you don't have to do a greenhouse or an agricultural crop. You're choosing one particular thing that interests you. So, like I said, if you're a turf grass person, choose tall fescue or Bermuda. If you're a greenhouse individual, you could choose a crop such as poinsettia, or you could choose geraniums, or you could choose any of the spring annuals that we grow in the greenhouse crop. That's totally up to you, but you're choosing one. Or if you're the outside kind of person that wants to be in the nursery or on an agricultural or farm setting, you could choose something like strawberries, as I give in the example here. Or you could do blueberries, or you could do, I'd even let you do something like corn or soybeans. It's totally up to you. You're just developing one IPM plan for only one crop. So we're going to use the turf grass, using the turf grass or crop of your choice, develop the IPM program. Output will be in a Word document that includes informations and pictures. So you're going to have to Google some of these pictures of the insects or the weeds, and you're just going to cut and paste and post it in your Word document. I'm not too strict on how the Word document is. You'll see on the rubric in the next slide, as long as you're using my favorite font and typesetting, you're going to be fine. But we'll talk about that on the rubric side. So the number one thing that you're going to have to do is you're going to have to identify the turf grass or the crop. So tell me what it is. Eric, I am doing an IPM program for tall fescue, and that's going to be in your Word document. At the top, you'll say IPM plan for tall fescue. Then do like an introduction. I am going to do an IPM plan on turf grass because that's going to be my career focus, blah, 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 blah. Introduce me to your crop. Second, you're going to identify the potential problems. You're going to list the major insects of the turf grass or crop. You're going to list the major diseases of the turf grass or crop. You're going to list the major weeds of the turf grass or crop. And note, it is important to know the pest life cycle, the insects or disease, and the stage that you would apply any treatment. And guys, especially if you're using, if you're choosing one of the turf grass, most of your information is in your O&T book. You're not going to have to do that much research except pulling some more elaborate pictures. I apologize for our text, but it's a great textbook, and it's got good black and white drawings, but it would be nice to see some colored photographs of that. But if you're in the insects and disease class, you've got a good reference with that textbook as well. Third thing you're going to do, you're going to scout for each insect, disease, and weed. And you're going to tell me how you're going to do that, the procedures that you would use. Are you going to use sticky trap baits? Are you going to use pheromones? Are you going to do visual inspection? Are you going to use scouting tools? Well, with turf grass, a lot of it's visual inspection. And the PowerPoint slide that I put up, just the slides, it even talked about, you're probably going to do it at least once a week with turf grass. Remember we talked about the chinch bug. You're going to start, I think, looking in early May and then continue through the entire growing season of the turf grass. So you're going to have, weekly visits to your site. Maybe could get by with every 10 days, maybe every other week. That's kind of going to be up to you and some of the research that you pull up. But we know that having a client on an IPM program, and that's all we're doing, say we're doing, turf grass management. We're not mowing or anything like that. We're just doing IPM and treating things that we see. The cost visits are a lot less. I mean, you could actually visit somebody's house for a lot cheaper than you could if you mowed and did everything else at one time. So you could do it for 10 or 15 bucks, do a visual inspection, be there 15 minutes, and then move on to the next one. So, but you're going to tell me how you're going to be scouting and what tools and things that you're going to be using. Fourth thing you're going to discuss is the management practices for each insect, disease, and weed, the cultural, physical, chemical, and biological. And again, your textbook is a good place to get this information. Fifth is what you're going to describe to me is the acceptable pesticides used for each insect, disease, and weed. Plant material consideration, you need to pay close attention to that, especially if it's a food crop. So if you're doing greenhouse tomatoes, in your greenhouse IPM plan, you got to pay attention to what pesticides you're going to use them, because we would be eating those tomatoes. But you'll discuss conventional, biorational, contact, and systemic, and placement and timing of these pesticides. 6 other options for controlling the pest, insects, disease, and weeds. Again, go back to if you're doing a greenhouse crop, some of the other insects could be introduced to the greenhouse to rid the greenhouse of your pest problem. Ladybugs are used a lot in greenhouse settings because it's a controlled environment, and the ladybugs can take care of the pests that are in there, and they're in a controlled environment. And we couldn't introduce ladybugs to a agricultural crop because there's no controlled environment, and they'd fly off and everything else. 7, you're going to introduce the pest control threshold. At what level are control methods necessary? Whether it's economic, the value of the crop exceeds the cost of treatment, aesthetic, unacceptable plant for sale based on visual appearance. So economic goes really hand in hand with your agricultural side. So or your greenhouse. You're growing a crop, and economically, it if it's going to cost too much to treat the crop, if it's going to cost more than you're going to make off the product, don't do it. You've got to set that determination, as well as aesthetic, which will go with your plants that you're selling. If you're selling annuals or anything out of the greenhouse, or if you're dealing with somebody's turf grass, when is it unacceptable for sale, or when is it unacceptable for the turf quality that you may have to actually use a pesticide. And guys, turf grass, you're always probably going to have to use some pesticides. There's no way to control crabgrass other than using a pre-emergent. Simple as that. There's no way to control clover other than a pesticide. It's just one of those things. So you've got to determine that threshold and determine when that you would apply the chemical. But if you're like me, you're going to be doing spot spraying. And if you develop a healthy, thick turf, you're not going to have as many weeds as a lawn that's not taken care of. You're going to tell me how you're going to record keep. You're going to set up, it could be like a table that you insert into your Word document. And this is, example, guys, because you're not actually implementing the plan. You're designing the plan to implement later, either for somebody's turf grass or for a crop that you would be growing. So you would develop maybe some tables to insert, Microsoft Excel, or within Word itself you can create tables, and you can just say, like, all right, start of the growing season for turf grass, week 1, I will record this, week 2, just a place to write this stuff down. And it can be as simple as some boxes, week 1 through week we typically mow 32 to 36 times, so we could do that many visits, 1 through 32. And then have check boxes, insects present, weeds present, yes or no boxes, things like that. But that's totally up to you. I'm not going to be picky with that. I just want you to be creative in what's going to work for you. If it works for you, then it works for me, because I want this to be a tool that you guys can take and use later on. And again, pictures. The internet's full of pictures. You guys are in education, so you can grab some pictures and put in your project. NC State Turf Files has a lot of great pictures on the insects and weeds for turf grass. And when you're talking about the potential problems in number 2, the major insects or the pests, talk about like the chinch bug. Insert the picture there and talk about the chinch bug. Give me a description of the chinch bug. Pretend like I'm your client and I don't know much about these insects or much about these weeds. You're describing that information to me, because this IPM plan will be something that you will give your client if you're doing a turf grass IPM, and say, this is what I'm going to be doing. This is what I'm going to be looking for. Is the chinch bugs, is the clover, is the crabgrass, all that would be in there. And again, your textbook would go hand in hand with that. And if you looked, actually, if you turn to chapter 3 in your textbook, insects, pests for turf grass, it's got your cutworm, your armyworm, your sod webworm, your bill bugs, your chinch bug. So you've got your information there. And then you just Google some nice pictures to insert into it. You got the Japanese beetle, the green June beetle, the masked chafer, the oriental beetle, and the mole crickets. And then you got some of the fire ants. It even talks about finding the pest, inspecting the turf, which would actually go back to number 3 for you here on the sheet. Doing the soap and water flush, the flotation. And these are things that you'll be doing as part of your IPM plan to see what kind of insects that you have. And it even talks about the action threshold. And even your cultural and biological controls are all in chapter 3 when it comes to the insects. So then you would check out the other chapters based on the weeds and the disease. So all your information is in your textbook. And then last but not least, the format, 12-point aerial, bold headings and bullets. I just want to see that used. So if you're talking about turfgrass insects, it needs to be bold. And then when you skip down, you're talking about turfgrass diseases, it needs to be bold, and then bullets underneath that. Again, output must be typed and double-spaced. It makes it easier for me to read. Bullets or numbers should be used for all lists. In the class HOR 164, your names and the date should be included in the lower right-hand corner. That's all I'm going to say about the format. It's real simple. The rest of the design is totally up to you guys. And we'll skip down to the rubric. There's 10 things that I'm looking for. The first one is identify the crop. Hey, if you've identified your crop, you get a 5. If you've identified all the potential problems, you get a 5. If you've identified all the scouting procedures, you get a 5. Management practices, 5. Recommended acceptable pesticide use, 5. Other options, 5. The threshold, if you do that, you get a 5. If you show me how you're going to use your record keeping, or how you are going to keep records for your inspections, you'd get a 5. If you use pictures, you're going to get a 5. And let's say that you've only used, pictures on every other ones, I might give you a 2. 3 meets it. If you put up some pictures that are decent and kind of explains it, you're going to get 3. If you've gone above and beyond and given me like 2 pictures per insect or weed, you get a 4. And then if they're just absolutely the bomb pictures, you're going to get a 5. And hopefully everybody will get 5, especially on that one. And then the format, if you just do format 12-point aerial and use headings and bullets that are bold, you'll get the 5 there. So let's say you've got 10 here and you get 5 in all these, that would be 50 out of 50. I would take 50, multiplies it times by 2, and that would be your score of 100. So fairly Don't really know much, more to say there. I want you guys to be in the 4s and the 5s. I mean, this should be an easy grade for you guys, and it's worth some good points towards your final grade. That's all I have to say about the plan. If there's any more questions, please send me an email. And this next Unit 4 coming up is not lengthy. I think there's 3 lectures covering the last chapters. So you've got some time to really put into your IPM plan, and it's not going to be as hard as you think, guys, once you get started. I mean, it might be a lengthy Word document. I mean, some of you guys may have 20 pages or more in it, especially if you get into this, because if you're like me, once you get involved with something, I'm a perfectionist, so when I start it, I'm actually going to just work on it until I get it done, and it's just going to be, more. I always put more into it than required. That's just the way I am, and I don't know what else to say more about it other than I hope you guys feel a little bit more comfortable about this after going over this description and rubric. Like I said, if there's any questions, just send me an email. Thanks, and I'll talk to you soon.